The tobacco country of the Chesapeake was the home of the Susquehannocks. They too were tired watching the colonists take their land. During that same violent summer of 1675, the Susquehannocks attacked and killed 36 Virginians. Virginia's royal governor, Sir William Berkeley, demanded a policy of restraint and refused to sanction reprisals. But a newcomer to Virginia urged a different kind of action. His name was Nathaniel Bacon. And during the summer and fall of 1675, he was probably the most discussed personality in Virginia, especially in the taverns where colonists from all walks of life were either for Bacon or foursquare against him. He seemed to inspire no other position.
He was the first man I know who says there ain't no difference between a hostile Indian and a friendly. They're all the same, he says. All of them would kill you if they had half a chance.
He lost his overseer upriver at his place, killed by savages. Bacon says we ought to defend ourselves against all Indians. How can you tell which one's friendly and which ain't? I sure don't want to get close enough to ask. So you got to figure they're all enemies.
But listen to what the man is saying, and think about what it means. He's talking about mass killing of human beings. We are supposed to be civilized people, and we're intending the same kind of mischief as the Indians. These are not mad dogs.
Bacon says they are mad dogs.
These are people, flesh and blood. People we've known and often admired. And some of these people have been valuable allies, and they can be valuable again. Now, Bacon wants to kill them all. He's also said we should make slaves of those Indians that survived the slaughter. And the terrible thing is, how many of you are following him?
What's right is one thing, but politics is another. The governor says you better not attack the Indians. Bacon says he sure as hell is gonna attack, and a whole lot of people back him up. So, who's right? Who do we follow? Do you fall in with the king's men or with Bacon's?
Myself, I gotta hand it to Bacon. When he came here, I thought he would be the governor's man and being rich and high-born and all. But he can't stand those people any better than I can. And he's gonna drag them down from their high and mighty places. I figure whatever he is, he's for the people.
Well, he doesn't represent all the people because he sure doesn't represent me. I think Bacon is just greedy for land, and so's all that rabble that hangs on his coattail. They couldn't care less about what's right and what's politic. They just want the land.
And the best way to get it is to kill off the Indians.
Right. I heard the governor refused to give Bacon a commission.
Oh, do you blame him? My own thought is that it doesn't really make any difference. It's just a piece of paper. Bacon's gonna take the Indian problem into his own hands. A defensive war, he calls it. I call it massacre. It's gonna bloody all our hands, no matter what. We're all gonna be guilty.
Well, Nathaniel Bacon did take the Indian problem into his own hands. The result was a conflict called Bacon's Rebellion. Before it was over, Virginia's capital of Jamestown was burned to the ground. The Indians were crushed. Royal troops from England were sent to put down the rebellion, and 23 rebel leaders were hanged without benefit of civil trial. Bacon himself escaped hanging. He died of swamp fever first. The impact of what Bacon practiced during this period represents a kind of genocide mentality that sometimes still haunts us. It was a curious and troubling event in our history. Bacon's rebellion set into motion so many forces, a few very dark ones, that would accompany us on our journey through time. How could we possibly have created a society out of such chaos, turmoil, and meanness of spirit? I talked with a man who has studied these relationships, Professor Gary Nash, a historian at UCLA. How was Bacon's rebellion a turning point in frontier settler Indian relations?
We might think of it as the last gasp of the Virginia Indians. It was the third war they'd fought since the colonists arrived at Jamestown in 1607. And disease had done its dreadful work over those decades. So they really were a depopulated and demoralized people. And their options had been narrowed down to really moving west to try and seek refuge with the Shawnee or other more western tribes, or to move north into pacifist Pennsylvania, which was a refuge and gathering place of a lot of remnants of tribes that had been through the terrible experience of disease and war. But it opened up the frontier for the Virginians. There was now land there for the taking. And that really leads to the other aspect of Bacon's rebellion that we need to keep our eye on, that it was not only a frontier Indian war, but it was also a civil war, a war between different white Virginians. Governor Barclay was lamenting in his letters to England that here he stood in Jamestown trying to rule over this population of people, 6/7 of whom he said were poor, discontented, landless, and armed. It was those such people, largely former indentured servants, that had followed Nathaniel Bacon against the governor. So we had a civil war going on top of an Indian war on the frontier. And when Bacon's rebellion was over, those rifts in white society were mended by this double shift of Indians being pushed out of the picture, and then in the succeeding decades, the Africans being brought into the picture. Now you have an African labor system, and whites are elevated above that system. Lower class whites can unify with upper class Virginians, form what one historian has called a racial consensus, built on the backs of African slave labor. The consequences of that labor system that are introduced, the African labor system, are going to reverberate down the decades of